Long time no see. I'm working as a flight attendant here. What are you doing now, Tyler? After dropping out of high school. At the airport, after more than a decade, I ran into Ashley, a beautiful former classmate from France, with whom I had a falling out back in high school. She ridiculed me when I decided to drop out of high school. Being a high school dropout, you couldn't possibly be doing anything significant. Why are you even at the airport? Ashley still had that tough look in her eyes and spoke to me in a condescending manner. I answered, feeling a bit uneasy. I'm a pilot for your company. What, you? A pilot? That's impossible for a high school dropout. Well, actually, as I was about to explain, she was called away by a colleague and left. Ashley and I, reunited under the worst circumstances. Little did we know, from this point on, our lives would become intricately intertwined. My name is Tyler. I'm a first-year high school student, part of a family of 4 including my parents and younger sister, Sky. My father's parents have passed away, but my mother's parents are still alive. They live in France, and my grandfather is French. So, I'm a quarter French. When you're a quarter, classmates often ask, can you speak French? But being a quarter doesn't mean you're born with the ability to speak French. I'm currently studying hard to communicate with my non-English speaking grandfather via video calls. I haven't met my grandparents yet, but hope to visit France and meet them soon. This makes me passionate about my French classes, putting extra effort into both preparation and review. In my class, there's Ashley, a returnee from France, and we always compete for the top spot in French tests. Ashley beat me to first place in the last test, so I'm determined to outdo her next time. During tests, everyone sparks off their own rivalries, but our class generally gets along well. Recently, more than half of us went to an aquarium even though it wasn't a field trip. Of course, Ashley and I were part of it too. There, Ashley and I ended up competing in pride, getting a French version of the aquarium guide pamphlet, and had a tough time. After all, it's a guide to the aquarium, so it's full of rare fish names. Since it's all in French, we had no idea what it was talking about. Both of us thought oh no the moment we opened the pamphlet, but with each other watching, it was too late to back out. We spent the day desperately with that French pamphlet, but honestly, we couldn't understand even half of it. Come to think of it, a few weeks before the aquarium, we also went to an aviation museum with a few people. I love airplanes and aspire to be a pilot. Ashley, who got free tickets, invited me and a few close friends. The museum showcased the history of commercial aviation and the latest technology in passenger aircraft, which thrilled me. During a break at the museum's cafe, I passionately talked about how amazing airplanes are, which slightly put off everyone else. But among them, Ashley was the only one who listened without disdain until the end. I guess Ashley must really love airplanes too. Those carefree high school days seemed to have a clear future, but that turned out to be a sweet illusion. It was on a snowy day, as the first year of high school was coming to an end. In our region, it rarely snows, so we didn't have any snow removal tools prepared. But considering the snowfall that night, we decided it'd be best to shovel, so my parents went out to buy one at the home center. The home center, located along the highway and quite far, would usually require a drive, but we didn't have chains, of course. Driving in the snow was deemed too dangerous, so they set out on foot. While my sister and I were house-sitting, we talked about how late Mom and Dad were. They were so late that we joked they might be drinking coffee at a cafe because it was too cold. They were unusually late. Just as we started to worry if they had slipped somewhere, an unknown number called my phone. Hesitantly, I answered, only to find it was a call from the police. My parents had been hit by a truck that slipped while they were walking along the highway. An ambulance was called immediately, but they passed away before they could be operated on. It was I who answered the call, but my sister understood everything from my expression and burst into tears. Holding her, I cried too. The suddenness of it all left me unable to think. I was only 15 and could do nothing but cry with my sister. What were we to do now? With our paternal grandparents in the U.S. already passed away, our only option was our maternal grandparents in France. They flew to the U.S. immediately upon receiving the news. During the wake and the funeral, they proposed, "Why don't you come live with us in France? We have spare rooms, so you can each have your own, and don't worry about school. We can enroll you in one over there." Leaving the U.S., where I was born and raised, was daunting, but with our parents gone, we had no choice but to rely on our grandparents, who were kind and made us feel safe. My sister felt the same. "It's sudden, but I'm quitting school and going to my grandma's place in France." When I told my classmates the next day, they were all surprised. Naturally, I hadn't wanted to burden them with the news of my parents' passing, so I kept it to myself. So, for them, it was like the guy who had been off for a week suddenly came back to school only to say he was dropping out. Especially Ashley, who was strongly opposed. "Tyler, come down and think. If you drop out of high school, you won't be able to do anything in the future. You want to be a pilot, don't you?" she said, near tears with anger. But I, having just lost my parents, couldn't afford to consider the true meaning behind Ashley's words. What did it matter if we couldn't do anything? We, siblings, were in trouble right now. Our only reliance was our grandparents in France. I was not without my fears. "It's none of your business. I'm going to France," I snapped. Ashley and I, usually on good terms, shouting at each other like this, shocked everyone in the class. Neither of us had the luxury to care about the surroundings, and we stormed out of the classroom. The next day, and the day after, Ashley was absent from school. Leaving without making up, I departed for France. Years have passed since then. Upon arriving in France, I was immediately enrolled in a high school there. I thought I had studied French quite a bit, but the French medium classes in French high school were truly challenging. My grandparents taught me words over and over again. They would read textbooks and school notices with me, translating them into English whenever I didn't understand. My sister initially struggled to fit into the French middle school, often crying, but within 2 months, she made friends and eventually became better at French than me, even teaching me slang. Thanks to my family, I never failed a grade and progressed through high school. Gradually, I no longer struggled with the language and went on to university. I fulfilled my childhood dream and became a pilot. After working for a few years with a French airline, I was headhunted by an American airline and returned to the U.S. Today, taking in the familiar air of the U.S., at the airport, I suddenly spotted a nostalgic figure. Ashley. During high school, I had a falling out with Ashley, who was now, as a flight attendant in the airline I'm about to join next month, walking confidently in uniform, pulling her carry-on. Ashley, when she saw me rushing over, she widened her eyes in surprise. But then, Ashley said with a hint of condescension, "Long time no see. I'm working here as a flight attendant. What are you doing now, Tyler?" After dropping out of high school, I answered, feeling a bit awkward. "I'm a pilot for your company." "What are you, Tyler?" Ashley looked puzzled. "That's right. How about we grab some coffee?" I was about to invite her to talk about my time in France when it happened. Called by a colleague in the same uniform, Ashley hurriedly ran off. Ashley, who had been beautiful since high school, had become more sophisticated and even more beautiful as an adult. The slim flight attendant uniform suited her very well. I watched her retreating back in a daze. Just before turning the corner, Ashley glanced back at me for a moment. Our eyes met briefly, and both of us quickly looked away in a fluster. After finally meeting, were we still unable to reconcile? I muttered to myself. The fact that I had parted ways with Ashley on bad terms had always been a nagging thought at the back of my mind. Still, working at the same company might mean something. I'm sure an opportunity to make up will come. Shifting my mood, I headed to greet the company. Next month, my first flight with the new company was to Paris. It was my first flight only in the sense that it was with this company. I've been flying for years. It was just another day of flying safely. Safely arrived in Paris, I was taking a moment to relax at the airport. "Tyler, would you like to join me for lunch?" One of Ashley's colleagues, a flight attendant, invited me to have a meal. She was quite beautiful. Well, most flight attendants are, but she was particularly stunning. "Lunch sounds great. Hey, why don't we invite Ashley too?" I suggested, thinking it would be more fun with Ashley joining, but her colleague let out a small sigh and quickly walked away. "Tyler, you're as oblivious as ever," Ashley sighed. "What's the matter? You two not getting along anyway?" "Ashley, how about lunch? I have a prior engagement." "Okay, no worries then." She curtly declined, leaving me aimlessly looking out the window. Despite saying she had a prior commitment, Ashley didn't leave immediately, but after a while, she glanced outside the window with me, then said "well then" and disappeared. I raised my hand slightly towards Ashley. She said she had a prior engagement, but I wondered if it was with her flight attendant friends. Ashley, traveling the world as she does. She might even have a boyfriend in Paris. The thought unsettled me for some reason. Maybe I still have feelings for Ashley. Of course, I liked Ashley back in high school, but that was over a decade ago. Even in France, there were girls I liked. I had a girlfriend during my university days, and there were a few women I fancied while working for the Canadian airline. Yet, being this unsettled just because a casual dinner invitation was declined. It seems I still hadn't gotten over my first love. With a wry smile, I headed to a cafe for some bitter espresso and a light snack. A few days later, when I was piloting the flight back to the US from Paris, something happened. Just as we were about to arrive at Los Angeles, my plane got caught in severe turbulence. Until just before it hit, there were no abnormal readings on the instruments, so it must have occurred suddenly. The aircraft shook violently to the left and right. Today, Thomas, who was on his first international flight as a co-pilot, was with me, and he was completely panicked, unable to even report back to the ground as he had been doing effortlessly just moments before. I immediately reported the situation to the ground and requested support. "Excuse me, Tyler, I have a report for you. Several passengers have sustained injuries," Ashley reported while I was requesting support. Though her words were calm, her voice shook, and her complexion, visible in the mirror, was far from good. Turbulence isn't rare when flying, but this time it was unusually intense. "Stay calm, Thomas and Ashley. It's going to shake, but take a sip of water," I said, trying to sound calm and composed, as they are the people I'd want to rely on in an emergency. Though my tone was calm and slow, my mind was racing. Then, a warning light indicating an issue with the engine started flashing. This was unexpected. Still, responding to unexpected situations is part of being a captain. I told myself to calm down 3 times, then took a deep breath. Next, I made an announcement to the passengers, explaining the current situation. Due to the shaking, there's a higher risk of injury, so I asked everyone to be careful. Even though it's an emergency, fortunately, we're close to our destination airport, and I informed them that we're aiming for a landing as scheduled. Simultaneously, I kept in close contact with the air traffic controller. Thomas's hands were still shaking, but since it was his first time on an international flight and he was faced with 2 issues at once, I could understand his panic. Ashley, please support Thomas, I requested. I understand the feeling of being overwhelmed, but he is still the co-pilot. It's crucial for Thomas to regain his composure quickly and support me. Ashley, who had taken a sip of water and looked a bit better, I asked her to follow up with Thomas. I was grateful that the air traffic controller was experienced. When the engine trouble occurred during the turbulence, I feared the worst. However, thanks to the controller's precise guidance and instructions, I managed to land the aircraft safely on the runway. Later, I heard that when we landed, the passengers inside the plane burst into applause. I regretted frightening them, but I was relieved that no one was seriously hurt, apart from some minor bruises and scrapes. Tyler, you are an incredible person. I knew you were a skilled pilot from what the boss said, but this is beyond my expectations. After landing and seeing off the passengers, Thomas, who had returned to the cockpit, grabbed my hand while crying. No, I just did what a captain is supposed to do. In reality, my legs were trembling a bit, but I hid this nervousness and managed to smile. If it were any other pilot, the worst could have happened. I'm here and fine, and all the passengers are safe, all thanks to you, Tyler. Your judgment was really outstanding. It was the air traffic controller who gave us really precise instructions, so we owe it to them that we made it, I deflected. To overcome such a crisis and still be so humble, I'll strive to become a person like you, Tyler. Thomas, deeply moved by the safe landing, was crying for quite some time. After taking Thomas to the ground, I approached Ashley, who was inspecting inside the plane. Ashley, are you okay? I asked, noticing she seemed to be limping a bit. Yes, I'm sorry for losing my composure earlier. No, it's natural to be startled at first, but you quickly became calm and helped Thomas, which was a great help. I had to get back quickly to support the passengers because they were all anxious. Ashley said with a smile. Did you hurt your foot? Just a little. I twisted my ankle while trying to support an elderly passenger during the turbulence. Let me take a look. I'll take care of it, I offered. I made Ashley sit down, carefully applied a wet compress, and wrapped it with a bandage. Wearing heels probably made the twist worse. It was swollen badly. There was also a cut on her knee, possibly injured at the same time, which I disinfected. Tyler, Ashley began, wincing from the pain of disinfection. I said something terrible when you told me you were leaving high school. It's late, but I'm sorry. It's okay, don't worry about it. I was also stressed and spoke harshly at that time. Sorry. Later I heard about your family situation. I didn't know you were going through that at the time. I was just scared and sad that you were leaving for another country, and I said those things to make you stay. After hearing about your family, I regretted what I said so much. It's all right. I hadn't told anyone about my family situation either. Let's consider this a reconciliation, okay? While tying the bandage on her knee, I smiled at Ashley. Ashley also smiled. Yes, a reconciliation after 15 years. After the turbulence incident, Ashley and I were able to return to the carefree relationship we used to have. I continued to be a captain, flying around the world, and Ashley, as a flight attendant on international flights, often flew on the same planes as me. Of course, all flight attendants support me as a captain, but with Ashley, our mutual understanding helped me a lot as she quickly grasped what I needed. Ashley also said, I feel more at ease on the planes you pilot than anyone else's. We maintained a good relationship. But there was one problem with our good working relationship. I still had feelings for Ashley, but now that we had become good colleagues, I didn't know how to tell her. I tried to ask her out several times, especially after long flights, but I was always interrupted by colleagues or ended up talking about work, and my feelings remained unspoken. We'll attend without ever being able to ask her out. They say first loves are never fulfilled. It was on one of those days, filled with such aching emotions. Ashley came and sat beside me as I was gazing at airplanes on the rooftop of the airport. Tyler, have you eaten yet? Not yet. I was just spacing out, watching the planes. I thought so. Here, I bought you a sandwich too. Oh, thanks. You're so thoughtful. Of course, you haven't changed since high school. Back then, you'd get so engrossed in talking about planes that you'd skip lunch. Really? I don't remember that. Yes, but I enjoyed listening to you talk passionately about planes. I didn't realize it then, but I became interested in planes too. That's why I became a flight attendant. I made you decide on a career because of me. Oh, no, I'm grateful to you. I think this job suits me. Ashley always looks me in the eye when she talks, but today she didn't. I was really happy that you were the only one who listened to me talk about planes until the end. Even when I went to Canada, I couldn't forget about you, Ashley. Me too. Her voice was inaudible, but I saw Ashley's lips move. Thinking it was now or never to ask her out, I took a deep breath. Ashley, I still have feelings for you. Tyler. Ashley's voice choked up. Ashley, will you be with me, with marriage in mind? Her response was lost in the roar of a departing airplane. But her face was full of smiles. Ashley, I love you. As I embraced her slender shoulders, Ashley shed large tears with her sparkling eyes. Tyler, I've loved you too, all this time. I always wanted to be more honest and jump into your arms, but I always ended up being stubborn, unable to say I wanted to be with you. It's okay, Ashley. I understand. I love everything about you, even your slightly clumsy ways. Let's always be together from now on the ground and in the sky. Promise we'll always be together. Don't go anywhere anymore. I won't go anywhere. If I do, it will be with you, Ashley. I remembered the time when I dropped out of high school. Back then, I was just a child, powerless, able only to walk away. But now, it's different. I've become an adult who stands on his own. So, I silently vowed to Ashley's tears that I would never let go, never let her feel lonely again. Years have passed since I returned to the U.S. Today, I'm flying with many passengers again. Ashley has now been promoted to chief. She efficiently and sometimes strictly manages the cabin attendants on board. The sky is beautiful. Before departure, gazing up at the sky from the airport, I reflect. Of course, the sky seen from the airport or in private is beautiful. Each country's sky has a different color, its own charm. But the most beautiful, I think, is the sky seen from the cockpit, carrying the lives of our passengers. Perhaps it's this tension that makes the sky seem even more beautiful. My life hasn't been smooth. There were times I was pushed to the depths of unexpected despair, but I'm glad I never gave up. I'm grateful to have grasped my dream. Thanks to that, I'm flying in the sky today. Ashley and I, having fulfilled our first love, are planning to marry this spring. I'll keep chasing what I believe in without giving up. If you don't give up, you can reach your goals someday. With these renewed thoughts, I head to the cockpit. You look like a mess at the bottom, haha. Emma said that, and, while I was still on duty, she poured the can of beer she had onto my head and laughed loudly. My name is John. My parents divorced when I was just beginning to understand things, and I was taken in by my mother, growing up in a single-parent household. I still don't know the reason for their divorce. I just vividly remember my mother crying on the night my father left. So, I never thought to ask about the cause of the divorce. Being in a single-parent household meant that my mother had to earn the amount that a father in a typical family would bring home all by herself. My mother worked multiple part-time jobs, tirelessly providing for me to have a comfortable life from morning till night. Seeing my mother's efforts, even though I was young, I felt that I couldn't waste her hard work. I diligently focused on my studies, even if it meant sacrificing things I wanted. I secretly wished to play soccer, but I feared it would affect my academics, so I never joined the club. Looking back, I realized that we didn't have the financial means to afford soccer gear like spikes or uniforms, so not joining was the right decision. I didn't buy reference books or attend supplemental classes like the other kids around me, but thanks to my natural intelligence and exceptional memory, I consistently ranked at the top of my class throughout my 6 years of elementary school. However, my mother, despite juggling multiple part-time jobs, never became a contract employee or received promotions or bonuses. Our life never improved. So, even as I entered junior high school, our family remained poor. In elementary school, I wore tattered clothes because we had no school uniforms. By the time I reached the upper grades, my classmates and teachers had figured out that I was from a poor family. Fortunately, in junior high school, most students wore school uniforms and carried designated school bags, which spared me from being singled out as poor in public. One day, during my second year of junior high, as the end of middle school approached, Emma, the most popular girl not only in our class but in the entire grade, approached me and said, "You're John, right?" Well, yes. Since I attended a different elementary school in a different district, I struggled to fit in from the beginning and had no friends, spending my time focused on my studies. At that time, of all people, I was approached by the popular girl, Emma, so I couldn't hide my nervousness. Whether she noticed my state or not, Emma continued without any concern. "John, how much do you usually study?" "Well, I arrive at school as soon as it opens, do some preview for the day. Then after school, I review the material before going home, and I keep studying until bedtime. That's the routine." "Wow, that's impressive. So, is that why you're so smart? Your name is always at the top of the test rankings, but I had no idea what kind of person you were, so I was curious." Saying that, Emma, who laughed, was cuter than any other girl I had met so far. From that day on, Emma started visiting me almost every day, saying she wanted me to teach her. Gradually, we moved beyond just studying, and we began talking about various topics, including life and relationships. As we moved up to the third year and ended up in the same class, we decided to start dating. I never imagined that I would have a girlfriend during my middle school years, especially not before making friends, and the fact that she was Emma was beyond my expectations. However, I always kept in mind that I couldn't let my studies suffer just because I had a girlfriend, so my grades didn't drop. Our relationship was going well, but it came to an abrupt end one day. On a holiday, we were going on our first date as a couple. Since it was a day off and we would be meeting in casual clothes instead of our uniforms, I wanted to decline, but I reluctantly agreed, thinking that Emma was attracted to my intelligence. However, when Emma arrived late at our meeting place and saw me, her reaction was different. "Sorry for being late," she began, but then she looked at me in shock. "What's with that outfit?" It was understandable. Because, at that moment, I was wearing a tattered t-shirt with a stretched-out neckline and shabby jeans, a far cry from a stylish look. However, I couldn't help but think if there was some way I could avoid the situation and said, "Well, you know, I'm not really interested in clothes. Besides, I have this thing for studying, and I don't really go out." Nevertheless, Emma didn't seem convinced, and she said, "I had a vague idea, but I didn't think you were this cool." On that day, Emma was shining from head to toe, and everything she wore was branded. Come to think of it, Emma's family was wealthy, and she was what you'd call a CEO's daughter, I recalled. Recognizing how shabby my own appearance was in comparison, I was overwhelmed by embarrassment. "I can imagine walking next to a guy like this. I'm sorry, but I can't date you anymore. Goodbye." With those words, Emma walked away, and we broke up. Life at school after that was hell. Thanks to Emma, who was at the top of the social hierarchy, my family's poverty was exposed to the entire grade. But that wasn't the worst part. With Emma targeting me as her enemy, people around her began to follow suit, mocking me and eventually subjecting me to considerable harassment and exclusion. According to Emma, it was payback for her humiliation. By looking down on me, the top student in the grade, she aimed to elevate herself and maintain her own status. However, I found it terrifying how her act of revenge escalated to involve the entire grade. The harassment I endured was relentless and took various forms, such as Emma opening windows wide, saying, "The air gets bad when John is around," hiding my textbooks and indoor shoes, and mocking me with comments like, "Did you lose them? Well, just buy new ones. Oh, it's sorry, my bad. You can't afford it, can you?" The list of harassment was endless. And it continued until graduation. Despite the challenging circumstances, the reason I kept going to school without giving up was my determination not to waste my mother's efforts. So, I focused even more on my studies, determined to protect my position as the top student, and I maintained that position by a wide margin. So, with that in mind, I occasionally gave myself a pep talk to overcome my fears and somehow managed to graduate. After graduation, while I did have the desire to go to high school and continue my studies, I thought that pushing my mother any further would eventually take a toll on her health. So, I abandoned my desire to study and decided to work as an employee at a hotel. My workplace was a well-known luxury hotel, and thanks to my mother's connection with the hotel's president, I was given the opportunity to work there, despite having only completed middle school. Mr. Smith, the CEO, was an exceptionally capable individual who not only managed this hotel, but also several others. Furthermore, he was incredibly strict. This wasn't because I was still a child with only a middle school education. It was Mr. Smith's management philosophy and the key to his success, as the senior employees explained. So, no matter how much I was scolded, I continued to work without getting discouraged. Being a luxury hotel, there was a lot to learn, especially regarding guest etiquette. However, with everything drilled into me, I gradually stopped receiving scoldings. "John sure has a good memory, right, Mr. Smith? If he couldn't handle this much, he wouldn't even be worth considering." No matter how much I grew, Mr. Smith never once praised me. However, I remained determined to redirect the passion I had devoted to my studies into my work and dedicated my entire life to it. Sometimes, I made mistakes, and I faced shouts from other employees, but I never backed down and wholeheartedly embraced the challenges. One day, when Mr. Smith and I were standing at the front desk together, he muttered as if to himself, "Maybe we should start another hotel." Hearing that, I silently thought that I should learn from his spirit of taking on new challenges and resolved to work even harder. And so, 15 years passed, and it was my 30th birthday. As I stood at the front desk, Emma entered through the hotel's automatic sliding doors, with a man by her side. While there was a possibility they were married given their ages, I couldn't see any ring on Emma's left ring finger, so the man was likely her boyfriend. As Emma approached, my heart raced, and my forehead broke into a sweat. Finally, they reached me. "Hey, isn't that John?" "Oh, Emma, it's been a while. I can't believe you're working here, you, who was so poor and only had a middle school education." With those words, just like in the past, Emma mocked me and then boasted about her boyfriend, who was an elite employee at a large company and had an annual income of $200K as they checked in. Although I had to carry the guest luggage to their room, I did so reluctantly without showing any emotion on my face. I endured a stream of insults on the way but pretended not to care. Meeting Emma and being reminded of my unpleasant past on my birthday was truly disheartening. Even though I was at work, I couldn't help but feel a little down, and my concentration wavered. Several hours later, during my break, Mr. Smith came into the break room and said he wanted to talk. After the break, when I returned to work, Emma appeared in the lobby again. Blushing and with slightly unsteady steps, it was clear that she had been drinking somewhere. That is typical Emma. I knew that dealing with her would be even more troublesome if she got drunk. Sitting heavily on the sofa in the lobby, Emma, holding a can of beer in her right hand, took a swig and then, upon spotting me, started to meddle as usual. "So, I wanted to ask, how long have you been working here?" "Since right after middle school." "Huh, that explains why nobody talks about you. I was actually looking forward to gossiping about you and your family in high school." "Haha, stop it." All I could muster was a dry smile in response. I didn't want to chat too much since I was on duty, and even though I knew her, I wished she would just go away. Still, Emma seemed intent on venting her frustration that had been pent up for 15 years, and she didn't let the conversation drop. If I had known a lowlife like you worked here, I wouldn't have stayed. This is the worst. Why are you at the front desk? You're more suited to be a cleaning staff." I thought Emma wouldn't stop even if other guests came, so I left the front desk and approached her. "Please keep your voice down. There are other guests around." "What? Why should I listen to you?" The next moment, Emma stood up and, saying "You don't deserve to wear such a nice uniform," poured her half-finished beer over my head. "There you go. A ragged look suits the likes of you." Emma laughed loudly. She looked just like a witch. Seeing this, other employees hurried over to me. But I stopped them. "I'm fine." "But you're soaking wet." "Yeah, I'll go change real quick." I glanced at Emma, saying "You've had too much to drink," and left. After changing, I returned to the front desk, and Emma was still sitting on the sofa. That's when her boyfriend came in, excitedly saying, "There's an awesome car parked outside. It's black and looks really slick. Must be custom made." "Really? I won't be surprised unless it's a luxury car. My dad has tons of them." They bantered, looking outside through the automatic doors. Then, several men in suits got out of the luxury car. Their suits looked so expensive that I thought some VIP must be staying here, and watched them enter. However, the group in suits headed straight for the front desk. Stopping in front of me, among the 3 employees, they said, "Mr. President, John, we've come to pick you up." Huh? I was initially bewildered, unable to grasp the situation. But there was no one behind me. So, it seemed the words were directed at me. Then Emma came from behind, saying, "What? This guy's the president? Guys, you've got the wrong person. He's just a poor lowlife who barely got a job at this nice hotel because he's doomed to never achieve anything more." The men looked confused at her drunken rant. "Do you know her?" one of them asked me, and I replied, "She's an old middle school classmate, sort of." "Sort of. Don't get cocky just because you were bullied." Just as Emma lunged forward, Mr. Smith appeared behind her, gently holding her shoulder, and said, "Please calm down." "Mr. Smith, what's this all about?" "Actually, I've been keeping a secret until your birthday today. I'm planning to entrust you with the new wing opening next month." I remembered when I first joined the company, Mr. Smith had muttered about starting a new hotel. When the new hotel was confirmed, I admired how amazing he was. I never dreamed he would entrust it to me. I've always been impressed with your work since you joined right out of middle school. Choosing to work at such a young age was normal in my generation, but it took courage for yours. Yet, you made up your mind and have been a great help here. I was tough on you because I wanted you to aim higher. I thought you were capable enough to handle the new project. Mr. Smith then held my hand and said with a kind expression, "I'm counting on you, and happy birthday." I couldn't stop my tears. I felt recognized by Mr. Smith, who had always been strict, and for the first time, I thought all my hard work had paid off. After gently patting my shoulder, Mr. Smith turned to Emma and said, "I hate to break it to you, young lady, but your father's company, the Williams Group, might be facing some tough times ahead." "What? Nonsense. Dad wouldn't mess up. This is so irritating. Let's go." With those bitter words, Emma left with her boyfriend. Later, I was taken out for a meal by Mr. Smith. There, I learned that the Mr. Smith's company had business dealings with the Williams Group. However, the Williams Group was famously involved in tax evasion in the area, and upon learning this, Mr. Smith immediately ceased all transactions. A few days later, I saw in the news that the tax evasion by the Williams Group had been exposed. Emil's father was arrested. Their company went bankrupt, and I heard Emma was left with a significant debt. From what I've been told, she's now wearing ragged clothes and trying her best in various ways. If I see her again, I might treat her to a meal, calling it a continuation of the date we never had. Looking in the mirror, I tightened my tie, gave my cheek a slap, and pumped myself up, thinking, I'm the president starting today. I had a beloved lady I promised to marry. We were both 30, the same age, and I had proposed to her, wanting to spend my life with her. As I nervously held out the ring, she smiled with tears in her eyes and said, I do. I will marry you. Oh yay, Mike, you're so loud. I didn't care about the people around us. I was too busy shouting with joy. I'm sorry. My face turned red as I apologized to Catherine. She laughed, finding my reaction funny. Catherine had lost her parents at a young age and lived with her grandmother. After seeking blessings from Catherine's grandmother for our marriage, I was on cloud 9, thinking our happiness would last forever. One day, Catherine and I decided to visit a nearby spa in Colorado. Mike, you always overdo it with the long baths. Sorry, I feel dizzy. I had stayed in the bath too long and got lightheaded. It was getting dark outside, and I felt bad making Catherine drive, but I was too out of it to drive. I'll drive us home. You can rest. I'm really sorry. I apologized repeatedly to Catherine and reclined my seat to lie down. That spa was so relaxing, right? Maybe that's why I stayed in so long. My skin feels so smooth. We should go again. Yeah. I stared at the car's ceiling, lost in thought. From the car stereo, Catherine's favorite song played, lulling me like a lullaby, and I began to feel sleepy. Just as I started to doze off, I heard Catherine mumble, "Is that car behind us tailgating?" Those were the last words I remember before everything went black. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a bed 3 days later. Something was obstructing my view. I mustered all my strength to call out, "Hello, is anyone there?" I tried to shout, but all that came out was a whisper. "Mike, you're awake. This is a hospital. I'll call the doctor." I heard the nurse's voice, and then the sound of footsteps. Soon after, a male voice, presumably a doctor's, spoke up. "Mike, can you hear me? How are you feeling?" Why am I here?" My memory was a blank slate. But I soon remembered being with Catherine. Concerned, I asked the doctor about her. "Where's Catherine? Is she okay?" The doctor hesitated for a moment before answering. "Mike, you were in an accident." "Accident? What happened?" I started to recall fragments of that day. We were on our way home with Catherine driving when suddenly, we felt a massive impact. But that was all I could remember. Neither the doctor or the nurses would tell me anything more than about my own condition. Confined to my bed, unable to move, and with no way of finding out what had happened, a week passed by. I felt my health improving bit by bit, especially after they removed the bandage from my head. Beside my bed stood a woman with a weary face. Despite her stern expression, there was a hint of sadness. "Why are you the only one alive? Why just Catherine?" It was Catherine's grandmother, Margaret, who I had met when we announced our engagement. Margaret's loud voice echoed throughout the hospital room, berating me. I forced myself to sit up and asked, "Please, tell me what happened. Don't you remember anything?" Catherine had a severe head injury when she was brought here. "Why, where's Catherine now?" "Catherine's funeral is already over. She had an organ donor card. so her body is. Margaret couldn't continue and broke down in tears. Overwhelmed by grief, I screamed out loud. "Mike, you shouldn't be sitting up right now." Alarmed by my shout, a nurse quickly rushed in. I was gently but firmly held down by several nurses and made to lie back down in bed. Margaret, looking drained, left the room with assistance from another nurse. When I closed my eyes, I saw Catherine's smiling face. I had wanted to protect that smile. Why was I the only one still alive? At that moment, I didn't care about my future. Yet, even with these thoughts, my body continued to recover steadily. Soon, I could sit up and gradually stand on my own. Eventually, I was discharged from the hospital. On the day of my discharge, I went straight to Catherine's grandmother's house. I was not able to attend Catherine's final moments and felt the need to pay my respects at her altar. More than 3 months had passed since Catherine's funeral. Relying on my memories, I reached the front of Catherine's house. With trembling hands, I pressed the doorbell. After the chime, a woman's voice answered. "Yes, who is it?" "It's me, Mike." "Pardon." She seemed not to recognize my name. I was her fiancé. May I pay my respects to her? Before I could finish speaking, the front door flung open. As I approached the door, Margaret stood there, her face stern. Without warning, she hurled something at me. "You good for nothing. How dare you show your face here? I never want to see you again. Just leave." Silently, I accepted Margaret's anger. She looked much frailer than when I first met her. She must have been devastated, having lost Catherine, her only grandchild and family. Feeling her pain, I was left speechless. Outside the front door, after her outburst, she broke down, falling to her knees in tears. I tried to approach and comfort her, but she said, "Don't touch me, I don't need your help," and stormed back inside, still showing a strong front. I couldn't say a word. I bowed slightly to the empty entrance and left. From then on, I frequently visited Catherine's house. I desperately wanted to pray in front of her altar. No matter how many times I visited, Margaret's attitude remained unchanged. She would just yell at me. Unable to say my goodbyes, I wasn't even allowed to offer my prayers in front of Catherine's portrait. Feeling lost, I returned to my job. I kept telling myself that I needed to be strong, to live a life that wouldn't shame Catherine's memory, so I returned to my previous workplace. There, everyone offered their condolences. Each time, I felt a resurgence of loss and sadness. Still, I immersed myself in work. If I didn't stay focused on something, tears would flow. I couldn't imagine being with another woman after Catherine. Work was different. If I worked hard, I could see the results. That's why I worked all the time. Then one day, I received a call on my phone from Margaret. For a while, I have visited her frequently, but then I stopped, thinking my visits might be prolonging her grief. Before I knew it, a year had passed since Catherine's passing. "Hello, is this Mike?" "Yes, speaking." Hesitantly, I pressed the call button as I recognized the unfamiliar number on my phone's display. "It's Margaret, Catherine's grandmother." "Margaret, I'm sorry for calling out of the blue. If you're free this weekend, could you come by?" I assumed she was inviting me for Catherine's first-year memorial service. That weekend, I visited Margaret. "Thank you for coming. Please come in." Margaret, who came to greet me at the door, looked even more frail and seemed lacking in energy. "I brought these. They are from Catherine's favorite pastry shop. Could I offer them in front of her altar?" "That's very thoughtful of you. Thank you." I sat in front of the altar and stared at Catherine's portrait. She was captured in a moment of radiant happiness. "Such a lovely picture," I murmured to myself. While I was praying and gazing at Catherine, Margaret spoke from behind. It's a beautiful picture, isn't it? Yes, very much so. Tears flowed naturally from my eyes. Oh dear, Margaret remarked, handing me a tissue. I'm sorry for all the times I yelled at you and turned you away. She bowed her head. Please, raise your head. It was my fault. I shouldn't have let Catherine drive. No, neither of you are to blame. It was the drunk truck driver. I took out my unplaceable anger on you. I made you suffer. I'm so sorry. My health hasn't been great lately. I've been worried about what will happen to Catherine's memories after I'm gone, so I wanted to reach out. Are you okay? Is your health all right? It's a selfish request, but when I'm gone, could you visit Catherine's grave for me? Margaret handed me a piece of paper with the address of the cemetery where Catherine was buried. Please don't say that. I felt a deep pang of sorrow looking at Margaret's sad face. There's also something else I wanted to give you, which is why I called you here today. Margaret placed an envelope before me. The front read, "To the family of the heart donor." What is this letter? It's from the person who received Catherine's organ donation. Please read it. I took the letter, carefully unfolding the neatly folded paper inside. Upon unfolding the neatly creased envelope, it was densely filled with handwritten words. It contained expressions of gratitude from the person who had received Catherine's heart through transplantation. The letter detailed their gratitude for having been able to breathe the outside air after enduring a long battle with illness post-transplant. The handwriting bore a slight resemblance to the way Catherine used to write. The note was adorned with rounded, endearing characters at the corners. Catherine's heart. It's still beating inside someone else. Margaret nodded in silent agreement. It wasn't long before Margaret passed away. I never failed to visit Catherine's grave every month to pay my respects. From then on, I was mostly immersed in my work. Having lost Catherine, and now in my 40s, I have given up on the idea of falling in love again. A decade had passed since the accident. Being deeply engrossed in work and being single for so long, my superiors and older colleagues began suggesting I should marry. There were only older female colleagues, except for one part-time lady, and they seemed concerned about my bachelor status, even broaching the subject of arranged dating. I'd always respond vaguely, politely declining each time. Then, a woman from another department was transferred to ours. She was 30. Coincidentally, her name was Katie. Hello, I'm Katie. Nice to meet you all. As she introduced herself with a bright smile, my heart skipped a beat. Because she had a dimple in the exact same spot as Catherine. For the first time since losing Catherine, I found myself constantly stealing glances at Katie. Mike, can you work with her for a while? Snapped back to reality by my boss's words, I responded, sure, nice to work with you, Katie. Thank you. From then on, we worked together constantly. She always gave her best, making diligent notes and always trying hard. Katie, you don't have to push yourself so hard. No, I'm okay. I actually enjoy this. Enjoy. Wow, I can't even remember the last time I felt like that at work. We both laughed, and then she said, I have been hospitalized for a long time, so I'm just happy I can work now. Oh, I see. I'm glad you're doing better now. Yes, Katie responded with a vibrant voice and a cheerful laugh. Her smile at that moment reminded me so much of Catherine, almost making me wonder if they were related. From then on, I found myself longing to see Katie's smile and began engaging in lighthearted conversations with her more frequently. When Katie started getting used to working alone and I was away from my desk for a bit, I found a sticky note on my desk saying I had received a call. Reading the handwriting on the note, I was taken aback. It was strikingly similar to Catherine's handwriting. The characters, with their rounded corners, looked so adorable and familiar that it took me by surprise. Katie approached and seemed to notice the note. "This sticky note, Katie, did you write it?" "Yes, you had a call a moment ago. They wanted you to return it when you can." "Oh, okay, thanks." She simply nodded and returned to her tasks. For some reason, I couldn't discard that sticky note and kept it in my pocket. I started to feel that Katie was becoming a significant presence in my life. Around this time, an older colleague started suggesting arranged dates for me. "A friend of mine has a daughter, and I mentioned you." "What? She's interested. Why not meet her, just for a chat?" "No, I really don't. Just meet her, come on." No. No matter how many times I refused, my senior co-worker persisted, trying to get me to say yes. Perhaps noticing my frustrated expression, Katie chimed in with perfect timing, using work as an excuse to speak to me. "Mike, I had something to ask you, but are you busy right now?" "Mike, just think about it," the senior said, trying to push the matchmaking further. Sigh. I replied half-heartedly. "Was everything okay?" "Katie, you're a lifesaver. Thank you. So, what did you want to ask?" "Oh, sorry. I just said that to interrupt you intentionally." "Oh, got it. Still, you really helped. It's not right to just meet someone for the sake of it, especially when I'm not interested." "In that case, why don't you marry me?" Taken aback by her sudden proposal, I was left speechless. Oh no, what am I saying? But when I look at you, Mike, I feel like I'm looking at myself. You feel the same way, Katie. My father doesn't approve of me working. Because of my lengthy hospitalization, he's worried about my health and pushes me to get married. You're still young, Katie. I'm already 30. Yeah, marriage is a personal choice, right? Aren't you interested in getting married, Mike? Caught off guard by her question, I paused for a moment before replying. I was deeply in love with someone, but we couldn't get married. I can't forget about her. Being hung up on the past at my age is kind of pathetic, right? I chuckled awkwardly to deflect. I want to experience a love like that too. You'll have plenty of chances in the future. But my parents are really pushing for me to get married, like right now. Is that so? So please, pretend to be my boyfriend. You were serious about that, I had assumed she was joking, but the serious look in her eyes made my heart race. If it's just for show, then that's great. Since we'll need to know more about each other, why not go out for dinner tonight? While I was still taken aback, Katie quickly decided on a restaurant and time and got back to work. After that, we started meeting more frequently under the guise of strategy meetings. We discussed everything, from how to make a good impression on her father to our supposed shared interests and how we met. As we started spending more time together, I began to notice a budding feeling within me. It was love. Being with her was joyful, and I started to desire to know more about Katie and to spend even more time together. However, I couldn't be honest with my feelings. I figured she probably wouldn't be thrilled about being liked by a 40-year-old man, and more than that, I was afraid of betraying my feelings for Catherine, who was my wife. Holding back these emotions, the day came to visit her house. We agreed to meet near Katie's home, and she led me to her residence. Are you nervous? Yes, very. I was incredibly anxious. A different kind of nervous than when I had visited Katie's grandmother. I was worried if I could keep up the charade. I'm nervous too, but my father was really looking forward to meeting you. I'm just concerned I might slip up. Katie chuckled softly. When we arrived at Katie's house, she opened the front door and her parents came out to greet us. Welcome, glad to have you here. Mike, please come on in. Suddenly hearing my name from Katie, I was startled. Oh, thank you. I removed my shoes and stepped in, offering the gift I had brought to her father. Here is the gift for you, I hope you like it. Her father just stared at me, not making a move to accept it. "Oh dear, thank you for your kindness." Katie's mother graciously accepted it in his stead. I had assumed they would be welcoming since Katie had told me they were eager for her to marry. However, her father's gaze felt penetrating, making me feel exposed. They led me to a traditional sitting room where her father took a seat across from me. Katie, claiming she would help her mother, left me alone with him. Without wasting any time, her father spoke up. "I apologize for making you go along with Katie's charade." "No, it's..." I hesitated, revealing my uncertainty. "Look, I desperately tried to smooth things over, but it felt like Katie's father could see right through me. It's my fault. I shouldn't have rushed her into all these matchmaking meetings." Resigned, I didn't refute his claims and just listened silently to what he had to say. She had been hospitalized for a long time. In middle school, we discovered she had a serious heart condition. Yes, I heard she was hospitalized. It worsened to a point where a transplant was necessary. Fortunately, a donor appeared, and thanks to that, she's now as healthy as you see. A donor? When was this? It was when she was 20, so about 10 years ago. 10 years ago. In my mind, I pictured Catherine's face. I was wondering, perhaps. She looks so full of life now, as if she never battled illness, but as her parent, I hope she marries a good man and has children soon. As we talked, Katie entered with a cheerful voice, saying, "I made a homemade cake. Keep what I told you a secret from me." Her father put a finger to his lips, signaling for silence. "What were you two chatting about?" "Just reminiscing about your past." I had a pleasant time with Katie's parents and went home that day. After debating whether to tell Katie what her father knew, I decided to reveal the truth. After work, I called her to a nearby park. "I'm sorry for calling you out here. I wanted to thank you for the other day. Truly, thank you. And about the other thing." Katie seemed hesitant, like she wanted to say more. Without noticing her discomfort, I revealed that our secret was out. "What? Dad knew? He hasn't said a word since the day you came over. Parents are sharp, aren't they? He actually asked me to keep it from you, but I've been thinking, I want our lie to be the truth." "What do you mean?" "Maybe I got ahead of myself when you mentioned marriage, but I've felt that I could fall in love with you all over again. I want to know how you really feel. I also want our lie to become our reality." As Katie confessed this, her face turned bright red. From there, our relationship, which began on a lie, turned into a genuine romance. "I've always wondered, why did you ask me to pretend to be your boyfriend?" "Well, during my hospital stay, I had a teddy bear that looked a lot like you, and something about you felt familiar, like I'd known you before, so I thought you'd be the perfect choice." "I see." Seeing Katie's puzzled look, I chuckled. That sense of familiarity. I wondered if it had something to do with the heartbeat of Catherine's heart inside Katie. But my love for Katie wasn't as a substitute for Catherine. After 10 years, I took out the photo of Catherine's smiling face from my wallet. I placed that photo, along with a letter addressed to Catherine, deep inside a drawer. "Thank you so much. Please keep watching over us," I murmured to Catherine's photo. I hope you enjoyed this. Your subscription to our channel really motivates us. See you in the next video. When I heard her voice, weakly apologizing, I was stunned. I've always known her to be strong-willed and assertive. It was the first time I had ever heard her voice sound so fragile. Such a weak voice didn't suit her at all. That's why I decided to confront whoever was tormenting her. This incident would greatly change the dynamics between her and me. My name is James, a 28-year-old working as a nurse. Nowadays, my paycheck is steady, and I never have to worry about putting food on the table, but it wasn't always this way. My family was slightly well off, and I attended a prestigious middle and high school. Back then, I was a typical nerdy kid with glasses. I didn't have many friends, but I never felt lonely. But I did have a friend, or perhaps a rival. Her name was Catherine. I assumed she didn't like me because she was always tough with me, but it turned out that wasn't the case. Catherine was simply very competitive. You see, we always competed for the top spots in our grades. Since middle school, we had been in the same class. I thought she was just a classmate, but one day she declared, "You're my rival," so I guess that's what we were. Whenever Catherine lost to me in tests or rankings, she would get incredibly frustrated. She had tutors and even attended after-school programs, so she hated losing to someone like me, who did nothing special. All I did was study because, well, I had no friends and nothing else to do. At first, I found her confrontations annoying, but eventually, that feeling faded. Perhaps it was because I got to see her hard-working side. Catherine's father ran a successful business, and she admired him greatly. "I'll take over the company in the future." That is what she professed to those around her. And it wasn't just talk. She was genuinely dedicated to her studies and even played sports to build her physical stamina. She was also actively involved in student council and volunteering. Back then, I didn't have any particular dreams or goals. But watching her work tirelessly towards her dreams was truly inspiring. She had a strong personality, but it was a sign of confidence and was cool. Catherine had charisma, always surrounded by people. She might have been bossy or demanding towards me, her rival, but she was generally great with people and had an uncanny ability to read the room. The opposite of me, who has no friends. She had everything I lacked. That's probably why I was drawn to her, and thinking back, I probably had feelings for her. But then, a life-changing event happened. The company my dad worked for went bankrupt, and he lost his job. Devastated, my mom's health declined and she was hospitalized. Staying in an expensive private school was out of the question, so I had to drop out of high school. News about my father's company going under and my dropping out spread like wildfire throughout the school. Everyone started treating me like I was delicate. But it was Catherine, of all people, who reached out to me during those times. "Why are you quitting? What about college? You could take out student loans and continue your education." Of course, I had thought about that, but considering our current financial situation and my parents' emotional state, I felt it was hard to continue attending a private high school. I explained this to Catherine, but she glared at me with tears in her eyes. "You were my rival. Why, fine. I hate you anyway." The expression on Catherine's face when she yelled was more of sadness than anger. Being the smart girl Catherine was, I believe she understood my family's circumstances. Yet, she probably couldn't sort out her feelings. I couldn't shed a tear when my parents informed me about the company's bankruptcy, nor when I realized I couldn't continue in high school. I felt I had no choice but to accept it. That's why seeing her, who could express her emotions so freely, felt so refreshing. I eventually dropped out of high school and lost contact with Catherine. I worked part-time jobs to save up money. With my parents' encouragement, 2 years later, I took the entrance exam for another high school and started my high school life over. During my mother's hospital stay, I was inspired by a nurse who took care of her, so after high school, I went on to nursing school. My second time in high school and my time in nursing school were financially tough for our family of 3, but we managed to pull through together. After I started working as a nurse, our financial situation gradually improved, and now both my parents and I live a stable life. Then, in my 4th year of working as a nurse, I ran into Catherine at the hospital. She came in as a patient. At first, I thought, could it be someone with the same name? But when I saw her lying in the hospital bed, it was undoubtedly Catherine. my former classmate. She always had a cute face since our student days, but she have grown even more beautiful as an adult. I thought she probably wouldn't be single for long with all the male attention she might be getting, but I kept that thought to myself. Upon seeing me, Catherine looked surprised, but quickly resumed her assertive expression. It's been a while since you dropped out of high school, right? Giving up and settling for a life without a diploma. What a loser. Her provocative tone was oddly familiar, making me chuckle. It has been a while. It took me 2 years, but I did return to high school. Thanks to that, I even became a nurse. Upon hearing this, Catherine looked at my badge and smiled just a tad. However, she quickly reverted to her assertive demeanor. Well, that's great for you. I mean, it doesn't concern me, but good for you, I guess. It seemed she had been genuinely worried about me after I dropped out of high school. I wish she could just admit her feelings. Seems like some things never change. She's still so tough with me, even now. After Catherine graduated from a prestigious university, she joined her father's company and has been working hard ever since. I was genuinely happy to learn she was still pursuing the dreams she talked about in high school. It's impressive. You always said you'd take over your dad's company. You're really making it happen. Truly amazing. When I said this, Catherine turned her head down. It's not that big a deal. I still have a long way to go. My dad, he doesn't really recognize my efforts. Her voice trembled, and I couldn't find any words to comfort her. Not wanting to dwell on the topic, I desperately tried to change the subject. Then, I remembered why I had visited her room in the first place. Would you mind if I took care of you while you're here? She quickly looked up. Take care. As your primary nurse, I want to help until you're discharged. Catherine bluntly responded, fine. But I knew that she was just playing coy. Let's make this a good stay. If you need anything, just let me know. She replied softly, thanks. And so, the beautiful girl from my past became my patient. Catherine was admitted because of a severe stomach ulcer. If she had come to the hospital earlier, it might have been better, but in Catherine's case, even the doctors were shocked at how advanced her symptoms were. Knowing her, she might have prioritized her work and endure the pain. I hope she could at least have a stress-free stay in the hospital, but for some reason, she was incredibly demanding but only towards me. Hey, can you get me that shampoo from the gift shop? Could you grab me some magazines? I'd like them today, and so on. It felt like I was doing more personal errands than actual nursing tasks. Come to think of it, she would make such small demands back in high school too. I never imagined she'd still be this way as an adult. Feeling a bit overwhelmed, I discussed this with another nurse, expecting some understanding, but I got a surprising reply. Demanding? Catherine, I've never noticed that. Moreover, not just one but all the other nurses seemed to feel the same way. A lot of Catherine's colleagues came to visit her at the hospital. I subtly asked them about Catherine's character at work, and everyone had nothing but praise for her. They said she's efficient at her job and communicates well with everyone, making the work environment smooth. This means Catherine's demanding behavior is directed only at me. Towards other nurses and people around, Catherine was courteous and had a good reputation. That's why I finally confronted Catherine about her behavior. Why aren't you this demanding with other nurses? What's wrong with me? It's not that. I don't dislike you or anything. For once, even Catherine looked demure. I left her room that day with the air heavy between us. But in the end, she never told me why she was only demanding with me. I think it is too much just because we were just classmates. But the next day, I started to regret a bit. Being hospitalized for so long and taking time off work must be tiring for Catherine. She might just want to be a bit demanding sometimes. I realized that I might have treated her more as a former classmate than a patient. As a nurse, I should first consider the patient's feelings. Thinking I should talk to Catherine again, I went to visit her in her room. But I couldn't enter right away because I heard voices from inside. From the hospital room came the stunned voice of an elderly man. Being hospitalized for a stomach ulcer is an exaggeration. Don't tell me it's because of work stress. Pathetic. Taking time off. I'm really disappointed in you. Dad, bye. Catherine's voice was so weak, I could hardly believe it was her. I guess leaving the company to a woman like you is impossible. You should have just stayed at home, learned to be a proper wife, and agreed to the arranged marriage I set up for you. That's probably all you're good for. From the conversation, the man seemed to be Catherine's father, but what he was saying was incredibly harsh. Ever since middle school and high school, Catherine had admired her father and worked hard to take over the company. From what I've heard from her colleagues, she has been continuously putting in the effort and is competent at her job. I wondered how her stomach ulcer got this bad, and maybe it has something to do with her father. Perhaps she overworked herself, trying to gain her father's approval. Come on, Catherine, stand up for yourself. I silently urged her in my heart, but my wishes weren't conveyed. All I heard was a soft, "I'm truly sorry," from Catherine. Her voice tightened my chest. Maybe it's my fault for giving you time and waiting. You've been a disappointment. Forget about work in the company. I'll arrange another match for you. To his words, Catherine's voice overlapped with tears. Please wait, I can still do it. I believe I can be of use. But her desperate plea went unheard. I clearly heard a heavy sigh from Catherine's father from outside the room. Sigh. Marrying into a beneficial business would be much more useful for the company. After saying just that, he left without lending an ear to Catherine's pleas. Nurses probably shouldn't get involved in the personal matters of patients and their families. But at that moment, as a friend, I couldn't just stand by and watch him walk away. Wait, please. Ever since she was a student, she's looked up to you and dreamt of taking over the company. She's continuously worked hard for it. Can't you at least recognize her efforts? Catherine's father looked at me perplexed. You're just a nurse, right? It's not your place to comment. I understand that, but as a friend, I tried to persist, but he interrupted. I'm in a hurry, and left. Without a hint of being moved by my words, he left with a cold expression. Back in the room, Catherine was crying. She covered her face with both hands, trying to hide her tears. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything. I apologized like that. In her usual assertive tone, Catherine responded, You really shouldn't have, I'm fine. Then, I held out my right hand to her. Then, show me your hand right now. Huh? Hearing my words, Catherine became hesitant, covering the back of her hand with her other hand. I gently took Catherine's hand in mine. The back of her hand was red. Some spots even looked like they had turned into bruises. Truth be told, since her admission, both the doctors and the nurses had noticed marks on the back of Catherine's hands, as if they'd been pinched. But when another nurse first inquired about it, Catherine seemed to try to hide them. So, the hospital staff was waiting for the right moment to ask her again. And just a short while ago, I accidentally saw it through the small glass on the door. While being berated by her father, Catherine had been digging her nails into the back of her own hand. I asked as gently as I could. You do this from time to time. Catherine remained silent for a bit, but eventually she shared the truth. Apparently, she does it when she feels an excessive amount of stress. It's pathetic. I can't even work well enough to gain my father's approval, and yet I'm so mentally fragile. I remember her being so confident back in our school days. But now, she seemed to have lost that confidence. Given the harsh words she'd received from her father while being sick in the hospital, it might not be surprising that she felt this way. Don't tell anyone, I cried. Okay, I know you've seen me at my worst since our school days, but I don't want to show my weaknesses to others, she said. It was then that I realized her whims that were exclusively for me were because she trusted me, knowing her stubborn side, and maybe a bit of dependence. Realizing that, I couldn't help but want to support her, seeing how hard-working and clumsy she can be. I won't say a thing, but hey, you can tell me anything. I might not be able to offer advice or solutions, but I'll always listen. Catherine gave a small smile and said, "Thank you." During the rest of her stay in the hospital, Catherine's selfishness was hushed up, and we spent most of our time talking leisurely. Perhaps Catherine needed a place where she could vent and show her vulnerabilities. She had decided to take an extended break from work. After her discharge, Catherine and I began to occasionally meet up and go out for meals. She had returned to work, but instead of diving back in full throttle, she seemed to be taking things more slowly. Spending time with me, I think she pondered on how to work while also taking care of herself. I was curious about her relationship with her father, but I decided not to ask until she brought it up. Still, her expression seemed brighter compared to when she was in the hospital. So, I chose to watch over her a little longer. During our fourth dinner together, I confessed my feelings to Catherine. Sadly, she turned me down. However, she did ask if I could wait a little longer. Of course, I asked her why, but she didn't tell me. But since she asked me to wait, I felt I had no other choice. 3 months later, out of the blue, she told me, I quit my job. After her discharge, her father had apparently tried to push forward with a marriage arrangement. But Catherine simply couldn't accept that and decided to distance herself from her father. "You sure about that? Weren't you saying since school that you wanted to take over your dad's company?" I asked. To that, she laughed and said, "I'm over it. Being with you, you've affirmed every part of me. I felt like I was able to breathe properly for the first time in ages. Food tastes better, and I sleep soundly. I realized I hadn't been taking care of myself at all. From now on, I want to live in an environment where I'm accepted for who I am." Her smile as she said this was genuine and unclouded. "So, will you stand by me as I make a fresh start?" she asked. I responded with an enthusiastic "of course," and hugged her. I was overjoyed to see her moving forward while cherishing herself. And so, our romantic relationship began. 2 years have passed since then, and Catherine is now working hard at a company different from her father's. I proposed to her recently, got the green light, and we plan to marry soon. After Catherine left her father's company, Catherine's father was apparently severely scolded by her mother. She told him, "Your way of thinking is too old-fashioned. Change your ways or we're getting a divorce." It seems that was the wake-up call for Catherine's father. But as we know, people don't change overnight. Nevertheless, it seems he's gradually coming to accept Catherine. We managed to chat a bit when we visited him to formally announce our engagement. Apparently, his excessive expectations stemmed from the fact that she's his daughter. Both Catherine and her father seem to have a mutual desire to reconcile. Their relationship may still be somewhat strained, but I hope I can help bridge the gap between them. I'm certain their relationship can be mended. After all, Catherine's father has a wife who isn't afraid to scold him, and Catherine has me by her side. I believe that when people have someone to lean on, they can become kinder and continue to move forward with hope. This is the story of how my wife and I met. Thank you for listening to my story about the woman I adore most in the world. I hope to continue building a happy home with her while I am under my wife's thumb.